Right, so before we get started making our sneakers, there are a couple of things we need. Most importantly, you need to have your last and you need to have your soles. So for these sneakers, I'm going to show you how to use just traditional cup soles, which are really easy to use and easy to fit your last too. So what I want to show you is how most lasts won't just automatically fit these cup soles. So instead of going and buying a whole new last that fits the cup sole, you can actually make adjustments on the lasts you already have. So that's a great way to save a bit of money, and it's just a bit faster as well if you don't already have the lasts. Okay, so I just wanted to show you first of all how this looks with the last inside. So you can see there's a bit of gaps in these areas, and it sort of doesn't quite fit inside like that. So what we want to do is we want to build up the last so that it does fit a little bit better. But before I do that, I just want to show you a mock-up that I had made. This is really rough. It doesn't have any stiffeners in it, and you can see I haven't even lasted it properly. What I wanted to check with this was how much do I actually need to build this up. If I place that inside the cup sole, and this mock-up was done on this last, by the way, you can actually see that, especially around the back, it actually has filled in the space quite well just with the layers of the leather. Around the front, it's still like a little bit loose here, but to be honest, it's more that it's a bit pointy looking for my liking. So with that in mind, and I can see, like, I can sort of press that in and it would fit nicely. But with that in mind, because it's sort of a little pointy looking, I just want to add a bit of width to the last here just to sort of round it out a little bit. So I'm only going to do it on one side. So we'll come back to that in a moment. I also just want to show you here on this men's last. So this is like a traditional men's dress shoe last, and it fits lengthwise inside this sole really nicely, but you can just see the gap that we have in there because of the pointiness of the last. So it's pretty much exactly the same situation. I just want to sort of fill in this area to make it a little bit more rounded and more of a traditional sort of sneaker shape. Okay, so let's start over here. What I've got in front of me is some of the strong shoemaking glue that I like to use. I've got a bit of vegetable tanned leather. This one's probably like anywhere between 2, 3, 3.5 mil, something like that. It doesn't really matter because we're going to be putting layers on top. So I've got a bit of that. I've got some scissors and I've got my safety beveler, and let's get to it. All right, so first thing I want to do is cut out just sort of a patch, really. I'm sort of thinking when I put it in the last that I kind of want to build up like the outside area so that it gets a bit more rounded there. So I'm thinking I probably want to go from here to about here, something like that. I can even see on this last that there was a patch there previously. So assuming someone else has made some sneakers on this last before. Okay, so I've cut a really rough patch. There's no like particular size that this should be. In fact, mine's probably a little on the long side. It's better for it to be a bit bigger, and then we can always shave it down or take some of it off. So all I'm going to do is literally glue that on there. I do want to bring it so that it's coming like sort of quite high up on the toe so that I can get more of a rounded feel right from the toe. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm actually just going to cut this a bit thinner. Right, so taking the glue, I'm going to place glue on the back of the leather patch and directly onto the last. It's really easy to clean dry glue off the last. So if you get glue somewhere you don't want it, just leave it there. Once it's dry, you can just sort of rub it off really easily. While that's drying, I'm going to make another patch for the other shoe. Okay, so now while that one's drying, I'll stick this first one. Okay, any overlap you have at the bottom like that needs to come off. So we can just take a knife and cut that straight off. Just be careful when you do that. I'm sure I made it look a little easier than it was. Okay, so it should be like this now at the bottom. And then we can see that we've got this huge sort of ridge here, which we don't want. So we can start skiving that down. But before we start, I might give that a tap with the hammer. All right, I also just like to give that a little tap with the hammer to make sure it's really secured nice and tight to the last. Okay, that's on really nicely now, but we do need to get rid of that ridge. So that's where our safety beveler comes in, and I'm just gonna start smoothing it out so that we've got a nice transition. Just look at the difference already of how that's sort of smoothed out that edge. So we'll just keep going with that. So that's actually looking really good now. You can see how much of a difference that's made to the overall shape. What I would do at that stage is that I would check it. Okay, so I'm going to put that inside the cup sole. And the most important thing is that we're not making it too tight because we still have to put those layers of leather around there. But you can see that that's fitting much nicer into that area now. It's kind of filling that gap. I'm going to do the same on the other one, and then I'm going to check them and see if we do need to add a little bit onto the inside as well. So that's also looking really nice now, and you can see it hasn't added really that much to the base, but millimeters really make a difference here. So let's check that one, and again we can just see how that's fitting so much nicer into the cup sole now. All right, so let's check those. By the way, if you haven't filled it out enough, you could just glue another piece of veg tan leather on top and then skive that down. So you can really layer this up as long as you're creating a nice smooth transition. I actually am not gonna add any more to those. I think those ones fit actually really nicely. So I'm gonna leave that. Just remembering it's good to have a little bit of space around the outside so that you can bulk it up with the layers of leather, and also that the sole itself is quite malleable, right? So as we're stitching that on, we can sort of cup it to the last as we go. All right, so next I want to do my men's last. So this one is pretty much the same area, to be honest, kind of just here to here. You can even take a little pencil and just sort of mark where you want to fill it in, right? So it's kind of like filled in from that point to that point. Okay, and same again, I'm going to cut a couple of little patches out of the veg tan. My scissors are breaking as I'm doing this, so I'm going to have to tape them up for the next step. All right, so let's get these glued up and repeat those steps. All right, so once that's had enough time to dry, you can just take your pieces and place them on. at that stage you could really even put it in and see how it's looking before you've shaved it down. But yeah, that's definitely made a massive improvement. All right, I'm going to shave that down. I'm probably not going to add too much more to this one because the last was already sitting quite tight in the sole. Because the soles have got quite a lot of movement to them, it's okay if your lasts are a little bit too small because you can sort of wrap it in around when you're stitching the soles on. And equally, it's okay if your lasts sit really tight because that can sort of bend out a little bit. But there is a tipping point to this either way. If the last is too small and you're sort of wrapping it in, if it's noticeable, it's too small. Same outwards. If it's like noticeably stretching, then it's a bit too big. But there is like a little bit of flexibility either way that you can get away with. Okay, if your leather patch is sort of coming up like this one is here, you need to get some more glue under there. All right, while that's drying, I'm going to work on the other one. Okay, so that one's looking good. This one, we can stick that bit back down. Okay. All right, so once you're happy with how your lasts are fitting inside your cup soles, you are ready to tape them up and start making your patterns.